tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. All right, so letting go. Letting go is a translation of the word that's at the heart of the very last step in the sequence of instructions known as Ānāpānasati, mindfulness of breathing, that we've been looking at for some time now. The Pāli term that gets translated as letting go is paṭinissagga. And don't worry about that too much. It's not one of the more well-known words. But some of the other translations of it are relinquishment, which I like, and it sometimes gets translated as renunciation. Although the word lakkhaṇa is more commonly translated as renunciation. But paṭinissagga, I kind of like relinquishment, which is a little bit antique, but letting go works well enough if we remember or reflect for ourselves on what the process of letting go really is, or looks like as a practice, or feels like as an insight or a fruit of practice. In the Ānāpānasati sequence, we come through the first dozen steps, really cultivating the steadied body, the steadied heart, the calmed and quieted and stilled mind, and the kind of perception that can perceive the subtle, that can be present with the mark of impermanence that touches everything. And from the recognition of, or the insight into, the clear seeing of impermanence, the process of release unfolds. There's an insight into impermanence, which becomes more specific. It becomes an insight into how things fall away or fade away, the endings of experiences, which mature as the insight into cessation, how things just stop, and how the whole body-mind can be felt to stop when grasping, clinging, attachment, complaining, resisting stops. It's really the sense of the first and second noble truths. The first noble truth, the truth of that which is of the painful, and the second noble truth, the truth of the cause of that painfulness, which is the grasping, the heart's contraction around resisting reality, really. That when that grasping, tanha, thirst, the second noble truth, when that constriction stops, the pain also stops. And as a side note here, right, you know that what we're really talking about then with this pain is not so much the unpleasant sensations, like oh, sometimes there's a headache, or sometimes there's body pain, there's old age, sickness, and death. Those things are painful. There's one layer where what stops is the emotional anguish around them, right? The fear of death, the fear of illness, the complaining when illness is here, the anxiety around pain and suffering, of attachment to things being a certain way and then not getting that, and how much that hurts. There's a way that the bulk of the relief of suffering that we find in this lifetime is a relief from the suffering of emotional pain, of painful stories born of ignorance and grasping. But it's also true that the implication in the first and second noble truths is, it's not just that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. So that's the sort of modern casual way of talking about pain. That's only about what happens in this lifetime. But the First Noble Truth is, it starts with birth is painful. Aging is painful, death is painful. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are painful. Not getting what you wanted is painful. Getting what you didn't want is painful. What does it mean for those things, for those kind of pains to stop? You know, how do you stop the pain of birth? You already had it. It was already painful. You were born, that was painful. Maybe you gave birth, that was painful, so I hear. How do you stop that? It's already happened. The First Noble Truth and the ending of that suffering is also about stopping the suffering of rebirth. So however you hold that that vision of our existence, where through the virtually infinite and uncountable, unconceivable past, we have been returning into bodies again and again and again and again, experiencing these various pains over and over and over. The proposal here is that the cessation, the ending of suffering, is not just the ending of emotional torment and anxiety in this life around our various stresses, but is also the end of the conditions that will lead to further rebirth and the actual physical pains of more living. So cessation is the peak, in a way, of understanding here. There's an understanding not just that we are trying to not get reborn, that's a little too literal, but that when seen clearly, every experience comes to cessation. Every, even momentary experience is, in a moment, gone, and gone forever, and never returns. And that when we know that depth of cessation, there's a kind of stopping through our whole being that is profoundly refreshing, but more than refreshing, opens the wisdom eye, opens the mind, the heart. And this is the mystery at the heart of the whole religion, you know, that seeing with profound clarity that everything is impermanent stops the process of rebirth. That's a mystery. They're saying there's this thing that's been happening like forever, and you've been suffering like forever. The Buddha will say, in all of these births, the amount of tears that you've shed is greater than the water in all the oceans. You know, the amount of sorrow and loss and pain that we've suffered is greater than, it's inconceivably great. And the Buddha will say, just this is enough to become dispassionate, to let go, to be released from all phenomena. There's nothing aversive in here. It doesn't say you should stop caring about the world. It says, as soon as you realize that this quirk of ignorance in the heart is causing pain to be your constant companion forever, it's not even really a choice, you know. It's like you just want to be free of pain. And becoming free of that pain is the most generous thing you can do for the world. It's said that the Thai forest master Ajahn Mun, who is our you might say, great-great-grandfather in the Dharma. If I'm here giving the talk tonight, my mentor who gave me authorization to teach was Jack Kornfield. His teacher was Ajahn Chah, and his teacher, for a brief moment, but an important one, was Ajahn Mun, the great reformer of the Thai forest tradition in the early 20th century. Ajahn Mun was alive and practicing in a time when a lot of people thought that liberation was no longer possible, and that the deep states of concentration known as jhana were no longer possible, and that all that was left really was to sort of maintain the ritual and devotional aspects of Buddhism in Thailand. And Ajahn Mun and some of his fellow forest monastics really worked hard to reinvent forest-style practice, deep, concentrated, meditative practice in the wilderness, and revived the forest tradition in Thailand. So they were practicing in a time when folks thought that liberation wasn't possible, but also in a time and a place where some Mahayana ideas, particularly Chinese ideas of refusing to become liberated in order to save all beings later. This is an idea that developed in the Mahayana teachings and is still current more in China and the Himalayas than it is in Southeast Asia. But that idea was around, and we know this partly because one of the ways that Ajahn Mun talked about liberation, when he told his story later to his students, Ajahn Mahabua wrote down Ajahn Mun's autobiography. I encourage the reading of it. It's beautiful. And you just get a window into practice in that time. Ajahn Mun said that as he could feel that he was on the brink of full liberation, the attainment of what's known as arahantship, the total destruction of the kleshas, the taints or the defilements, he paused. His heart sort of flinched for a moment, and you get the sense that he was under the influence both of the idea that it couldn't be done and the idea that it shouldn't be done, which was the Mahayana ideal, right? That instead you should wish to be a bodhisattva forever rather than be an arahant. And these are both, in that moment, we could say, versions of the hindrance of doubt, right? They're both aspects of Mara. It's not only the message, you're not able to do this because nobody can get enlightened anymore, but it's also, you shouldn't do this. In a strange sort of spiritual bypass, Mara might try to use the Mahayana teaching of the Bodhisattva as a way to stop someone like Ajahn Mun from becoming fully liberated. And he reflected that no, it's good that there are arhants in the world, that there are fully liberated beings in the world. It's a good thing for the world to have beings like that. And he became one. He let go, right? He let go into that. And the letting go of those final layers of doubt, that's what is the doorway to that kind of liberation, right? The doorway to any of the liberated paths or the fruits of practice, the doorway is a kind of letting go, right? There's something has to fall away, and then you enter a new form of being, a new type of being. So classically speaking, in the Ānāpānasati, impermanence is the doorway. Seeing impermanence, seeing the fading away, seeing the cessation, and what matures is paṭinissagga, the letting go or relinquishment. Again, it's not a thing that you do intentionally. At this point in practice, if you've got some samadhi going, you're not running around in the psyche like with a monkey wrench doing things. Now I will uproot this thing and move this over. You're not gardening, in the mind at this point so actively. It's really a letting go and the letting deeper go, letting deeper go. And part of how insight unfolds is very classically through insight into, or seeing profoundly, these qualities that impermanence is one of three great qualities that are called the marks of existence, or the characteristics of conditioned things. Those three things are impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness. So anicca, impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, and anatta, selflessness or not self. And they go together. They're separate insights in the sense that you can get a flash into one or another of them at different times. They're even, in a certain way, personality types. Like some folks will have a strong sort of like resonance with one of those, and that'll be their main doorway. But they really imply each other. They all come together. And they come together as I'm not sure whether they are like a support for letting go, or letting go is what happens in order to see them. I think really often what happens is the mind gets somewhat quiet, attention gets open, we begin to observe, mindfulness is strong, and there's a flash of seeing or understanding these things. Say, oh, I see or I feel really the passing of things, the endings of experiences. I notice, this thing that was obsessing me for the last year or like the last 10 years, it's just gone. What happened? You know, a whole part of way of being myself. I'm like, oh, that changed. You know, and in Vipassana, particularly because a lot of us are under the influence of contemporary, very momentary oriented schools, like the Mahasi school that has you noting mind states, you know, noting every couple of seconds, labeling what's happening, or the Goenka system that has you sweeping through the body, noticing microscopic sensations as you notice your, you know, the outside of your upper middle arm, and then the inside of your upper middle arm, you know, like in some detailed way. That you can notice impermanence there for sure, and that'll get you some concentration. But you know, you could also notice. You can go in anywhere you can feel it. You know, it's raining right here at the moment, so I'm listening to the sound of the rain on the roof. But yesterday it was sunny, and we worked in the garden all day and built some beds and tore out a butterfly bush, did some things. And so yesterday we had a sunny family day. Today we had a rainy school and work day. And one of the things that defines grasping, you know, is being messed up in relation to time. Right? Like I'm spending so much time thinking about the past, or I'm spending so much time planning the future, or I'm spending so much time kind of just hating on the present. You know, oh my God, it's raining again. But if I just settle in, and the meditation is very helpful for this. I settle in, what do I get? I get like, here it is, you know, here's the rain on Tuesday night, and you know, and earlier it was like this, and before it was like this, and before it was like this, and yesterday's sunny day in the garden is gone. It has come to cessation. You know, start with anything that you can contact, and it's easy enough to think about, but the felt sense is what do I want to say about the felt sense of impermanence? It's, don't let it just be intellectual, you know, or like some bit of narrative you say is like, well, everything's changing. It's almost like if we can really grok how deep it is that everything is changing, it's almost like I could barely even make a joke about it. I can, but you know, I don't even really want to. When I contact it for real, there's a kind of extraordinary space that opens up. The characteristics are completely interwoven. So, because everything changes, is impermanent, nothing can be permanently satisfying. Nothing can really answer my heart's longing for safety, for instance. One of the great, profound nervous system urges to be safe from harm and danger. To be safe from hunger. To take a really straightforward example, right? Sometimes I'm hungry, I have the privilege of having food, I eat the food, I'm not hungry anymore. Satisfaction has been attained, The unpleasant feelings of hunger are dissipated. And then, 3 hours later, or 10 minutes, whatever your jam is, but like there they are again, right? And so, we know through experience, and just, we have enough maturity to know, my kid doesn't always know this, but I know this, that there's this cyclical relationship of hunger and eating and feeling satisfied and nourished and ongoing health and things like that. You know how that works. And so you don't fall into the delusion after a meal that you'll never have to eat again. That's it. I've arrived at the divine state of fullness. I had the perfect rice and kale and tofu, which I happened to have an hour and a half ago. The perfect rice and kale and tofu. I feel full. I don't need anything except a sip of water. I never need to eat again. But oh look, here comes tomorrow morning, and I'll be hungry again. I mean, here comes 10:30. I'll be hungry again at 10:30 to food, And so, why would we then fall into that mistake around other things that are, like we haven't learned the cycle yet, right? Like, oh, I finally met a good person and I'm gonna date them, marry them, whatever them. Now my search for the feeling of connection and intimacy is over. I'll never feel not disconnected again. It doesn't work that way, right? And I work so hard to keep myself healthy, and I am currently healthy. I'll never be sick again. It doesn't work that way. So, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, comes with impermanence. It's implied by impermanence. It's never separate from impermanence in a way, because conditions are constantly changing. The uncomfortable is always right around the corner. And so then the insight is to notice that that's always the case. So here we are in the lovely moment of sharing the Dhamma together. It's impermanent, right? That will end. And so the pleasure of being in a wholesome thing with you all is also colored by the reality of impermanence. And then if I grasp at this, if it occurs to me that hanging out with you all is, I just enjoy it more than some other things that I have to do, getting on the spreadsheets, looking at projected revenues, I don't know, doing the technical things. If I forget impermanence, then suffering is going to be close at hand, right? Because I'll grasp. I'll say, oh, I'd rather be talking Dharma with my friends than filling out my taxes or doing whatever thing. I had a big revenues task at work this week, so I'm all like, oh yes, There's the pleasure of talking Dharma, and then there's the non-pleasure of looking at projected revenue spreadsheets, right? But both of those are impermanent. And if I forget that, I'm going to suffer. The third one is anatta, selflessness or not self. And again, it's intimately tied to the others. This word self, don't get too messed up about it. It doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean you're not a unique, beautiful snowflake. You are indeed. So is everything. But it doesn't mean that you don't have a self. It doesn't mean that you're not somebody, or that your self isn't important. Self is a poor translation of the word atta. The Sanskrit that's quite familiar is atman. And it really means stable, permanent, essential nature. It's a philosophical term meaning the essence of a thing that doesn't change no matter the conditions. So for people, probably the best translation is soul, actually. And even that only works if you get away from sort of Christian ideas that your soul could, for instance, find itself in hell or heaven for a long time. That would be the soul changing by different conditions, depending on whose theology you're following. Soul or atta or self here, it refers to something that is unconditioned. And the recognition of the Buddha was that none of our experiences, none of the things that we can notice through any of our senses, including the thinking and feeling sense, that none of those experiences last in an unchanging way. You can't find any aspect of your experience that is unchanging. Even the sense of being yourself, it comes and goes. Sometimes you're asleep, sometimes you're high, sometimes you're confused, sometimes you're 6 months old, sometimes you're 99 years old, and in any of those times you might completely forget who you are. You might even just get super angry in a way that isn't really you, and you're like, wow, I was not acting like myself there, because the sense of self, the sense of being who I am, is impermanent like anything else, because it's not static. It's like I have a sense of I have a sense of being a person, but that sense is just a combination of moods and feelings and sensations and memories and storylines that I participate in, all of which is real enough and useful, right? And all the therapists in the room know that if you're a mess about your narrative, you got to sort it out, or else more dukkha, right? More suffering. But having a cleaned out narrative of yourself, like a coherent narrative is one of the terms used, that can decrease the suffering of confusion, but it's not the definition of your soul. It doesn't define you beyond the bounds of this body. It might not even define you beyond the bounds of this particular phase of your adult life. Other things, it feels like other things at other times. And yeah, there's a comment in the chat here that even, quote, enlightenment is conditioned. Absolutely, right? First of all, the concept of enlightenment is just a conditioned concept. People are telling you it's like this. And the idea that there's a thing that sometimes you are it and sometimes you aren't it, that's also conditioned, right? That can't be yourself either, because it changes, right? Anything that's an experience or a state, we would say, is conditioned. And so deep states of samadhi, the profoundly settled body-mind, is conditioned. It's conditioned by stillness and silence and long practice and, enough health and well-being to be able to settle. and lots of other conditions. So these three characteristics, nothing lasts. Because of that, it's unreliable. Nothing is reliable ultimately, and nothing can be called myself, or you could say like my permanent home. There's no permanent home, psychically speaking. These insights come together to make possible the fruition of letting go. Right? These insights come together to give rise to the understanding of cessation, of stopping. Right? If I really get that every moment's experience is flickering through, unreliable as a ground, and that there's not some me that is grounded experiencing it, but that the me also is an experience that's flickering through and ungrounded. What is that space like? If I really hook into that, that space turns out to feel things like radically spacious, radically silent, radically still. It can feel like everything stops. And again, all of those are states. Those are conditioned. I'm having an ecstatic moment of seeing clearly. That's a conditioned moment. It's an insight. But it's pointing to something that is unconditioned. And what it inspires, if it comes with some fullness, is it inspires the spontaneous dropping away of the parts of ourselves, or the really habitual actions in ourselves that are in resistance in a certain way to these marks of impermanence, suffering, and selflessness. So to resist impermanence is to grasp, right? To wish that something stayed the same, or to wish that something would change differently than it is, grasping. So that's resistance to impermanence. To wish that something wasn't unpleasant, to wish that that pleasant things would last longer, or unpleasant things would be less unpleasant, or that pleasant things would be more pleasant. I'm resisting the truth of the unsatisfactoriness of things. I'm pretending that a thing could be satisfactory. This will be it, right? I understand that everything is marked by dukkha, by unsatisfactoriness, but this job, this house, this partner, this sexual encounter, this, heroic protest action with 100,000 people will really stop the war. It's going to be okay if we do it right. There were some really big anti-war actions around here today and yesterday mostly, on Martin Luther King Day. And I was in the garden with my kiddo, but I remembered back to some protests that I was part of when the United States invaded Iraq quite some years ago now. And I remembered being in a huge march in San Francisco with a whole bunch of friends from many different communities, and I had the privilege of getting arrested at the Federal Building with my teacher Jack Cornfield and this lovely Franciscan monk who was at all the protests in those days, and a bunch of other sort of contemplative activist types. And it was a huge march, a huge protest, lots of energy. And it was that day, it was in February of 2002, something like that. I don't know, something like that. And it was, and there were protests all around the world on the same day. And I remember having this flicker of a feeling on that day that, what if it actually could be the case that these millions and millions and millions of people would gather together all around the world and say, don't go to war. Don't do this. It's not a good moment to go to war. This is not the right war. Don't do it. And that the American government would listen and not do it. And I remember the feeling of being like, maybe it'll work this time. Maybe they won't do it. And then they totally did it. And the karmic wheel continued to unfold, and here we are, all of these years later, right? In a not unrelated, painful situation in the Middle East, and that's that in a certain way to resist that's dukkha, that thought, like maybe it'll be different this time, and like please have that thought. Like I'm not saying to give up hope. What I'm saying is to give up grasping, right? That what this really points to is that when the heart refuses, mostly through force of ancient habit and fear, to be real with the world, to be real with how things actually are, there's going to be this constriction of the heart known as dukkha. There's going to be the painfulness. And anatta is the implied result of both of those. There's just no thing in my experience that I can find, that I can grab onto and I can say, this is me. This is the secure me. This is the permanent me. This is the safe, at home, grounded, inviolable me. And so letting go, paṭinissagga, is really the recognition in the heart that those things are true. So you have to see them, and the seeing them gives rise to the insight into letting go. Right? You don't let go on purpose. You can't be like, okay, psyche, stop grasping. You can do that. You probably have. You're here after all. But how well did that work? Right? The heart is like, yeah, buddy, I hear ya. Tell me another one. But letting go is a maturing. It's a result of practice, and particularly it's a result of seeing the characteristics, of really understanding that the heart has no home. It's okay that the heart has no home. It never did. There's so much goodness in the world. It doesn't actually need to. But recovering from the idea that we need to pin it down somehow in order to feel safe. When that lets go, the shift into whatever comes next. The whatever comes next is called nibbana, the extinguished flame. The first glimpse into that is called entering the stream of the noble ones, or the clear ones, and it's marked by the strange brightness that comes when letting go has matured in the heart. So I'll close by I'll close with a little sutta quote. I pulled this up. Thinking about this quality of letting go. This is not the Ānāpānasati. This This is a text from the Majjhima, an earlier text in the Majjhima 112. The sixfold purification. And it uses, so here's this passage. For a mendicant or a practitioner with defilements ended, it is in line with the teaching to answer. This is, the discussion here is, how does an awakened one describe their state or describe their own liberation? And they describe it using the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perceptions, formations, and consciousness. But listen to this description. This is really like a string of different ways of talking about letting go. Knowing that form is powerless, fading, and unreliable, I understand that my mind is freed through the ending, fading away, cessation, giving away, and letting go of attraction, grasping, mental fixation, insistence, and underlying tendency for form. So all of the characteristics are contained here. Knowing that form is powerless, fading, and unreliable. Fading is the same word as the that falling away or fading away that was step 14, to count backwards, 16, 15, 14 in Ānāpānasati. And unreliable, right? That's dukkha. That's the dukkha. It's you can't be a permanent home. I understand that my mind or heart is the citta is freed through the ending, fading away, cessation, giving up, and letting go of attraction, grasping, mental fixation, insistence, and underlying tendency for form. And then that same paragraph for each of the 5 aggregates of form: feeling, which is pleasant, unpleasant, neutral; perception, choices or mental formations; and consciousness itself. Consciousness itself is powerless, fading, and unreliable. So that is how I know and see regarding these 5 grasping aggregates, so that my mind is freed from defilements by not grasping. So it all hinges on this term letting go, right? Knowing or seeing that form is powerful, fading, and powerless, fading, unreliable. There's an understanding that the mind is freed, or the heart is freed, through the ending of all these things. That's what's happened naturally, the ending, fading away, and the letting go. Like these are the ending, fading away, cessation, giving away, and letting go. All of those are, in a way, synonyms, but I like how they point to, there's some elements of discipline in it, but so much of it is the natural ending of things. These things have been released: attraction, grasping, fixation, etc. So this is where all of this is. This is where all of this is headed. All right, so we'll pause there. Thank you for listening and being here.